to Spotlight. I'm Bruce Gulland. And I'm Colin Lowther.
My photo taste is Pinterest because they are the best.
Broadcasting. It is easier for people to understand no matter where in the world they live.
African stories should be told by Africans. I think that is what is important with GPI. We are community reporters. We know our local communities. We communicate with them every day. My name is Nakinti Nofuru. I am a reporter for GPI.
Nakinti Nofuru talked about her work with GPI in a video. She is a reporter in Cameroon for the Global Press Institute, or GPI. GPI is different than most news organizations. They provide training and jobs for women. These women, like Nofuru, become high-quality reporters. They share important news from their communities with the rest of the world. Today's spotlight is on the Global Press Institute. Christy Hegranis is a young woman from the United States. In 2004, she was working as a reporter in Nepal. But she saw that she was not the best person to write stories about Nepal. There were local women who had a lot of knowledge about what was happening in their communities. Hegranis said in a press release,
I saw that no matter how much I knew about Nepalese culture, I would always be a foreigner. I would always face a space that I could not cross in the social, historical, and political situation of reporting. It seemed clear that those most able to report the news were the local people, not a woman from the West.
Hegranis left her job and began a new organization. She called it the Global Press Institute. Her goal was to train local women in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. It is often difficult for women to find work that pays them well. And in these areas, women did not have the opportunity to be trained as reporters. GPI could train and employ them as reporters. They would be able to have a good job. In 2006, GPI began training women. GPI uses a particular method in their training. The women learn how to write good stories from story coaches. These are people who teach good story writing skills. The women also learn to take photographs to publish with their stories. An important part of reporting is to make sure that the facts are correct. GPI trains reporters to research everything carefully. The women learn how to find good information sources for their stories. For example, a source can be a person the reporters talk to find out what is truly happening. Sources can also be documents and other materials. By finding good sources, the reporters produce news that is very local, but also of very high quality.
For example, Yvonne Genot-Lyons is a GPI reporter in Argentina. She wrote a popular story about a group in Argentina called Make It Sound. This group teaches people to make musical instruments from garbage that people have thrown away. This story shared interesting community news that people often do not read. Often, international reporters cannot understand what is happening on a community level.
My photo taste is the Pinterest because they are the best. Flick to link, a link to flick.
Speaking up is hard to do. I understood the true meaning of this phrase exactly 1 month ago when my wife and I became new parents. And it was an amazing moment. It was exhilarating and elating, but it was also scary and terrifying. And it got particularly terrifying when we got home from the hospital. And we were unsure whether our little baby boy was getting enough nutrients from breastfeeding. And we wanted to call our pediatrician, but we also didn't want to make a bad first impression or come across as a crazy neurotic parent. So we worried and we waited. When we got to the doctor's office the next day, she immediately gave him formula because he was pretty dehydrated. Now, our son is fine now, and our doctor has reassured us we can always contact her. But in that moment, I should have spoken up, but I didn't. But sometimes we speak up when we shouldn't. And I learned that over 10 years ago when I let my twin brother down. My twin brother is a documentary filmmaker. And for one of his first films, he got an offer from a distribution company. And he was excited, and he was inclined to accept the offer. But as a negotiations researcher, I insisted he make a counteroffer. And I helped him craft the perfect one. And it was perfect. It was perfectly insulting. The company was so offended, they literally withdrew the offer, and my brother was left with nothing. And I've asked people all over the world about this dilemma of speaking up, when they can assert themselves, when they can push their interest, when they can express an opinion, when they can make an ambitious ask. And the range of stories are varied and diverse, but they also make up a universal tapestry. Can I correct my boss when they make a mistake? Can I confront my coworker who keeps stepping on my toes? Can I challenge my friends in sensitive joke? Can I tell the person I love the most my deepest insecurities? And through these experiences, we've come to recognize that each of us have something called a range of acceptable behavior. Now, sometimes we're too strong. We push ourselves too much. That's what happened with my brother. Even making an offer was outside his range of acceptable behavior. But sometimes we're too weak. That's what happened with my wife and I. And this range of acceptable behaviors, when we stay within our range, we're rewarded. And we step outside that range, we get punished. In a variety of ways. We get dismissed or demeaned or even ostracized. Or we lose that raise or that promotion or that deal. Now, the first thing we need to know is, what is my range? But the key thing is, our range isn't fixed. It's actually pretty dynamic. It expands and it narrows based on the context. And there's one thing that determines that range more than anything else, and that's your power. Your power determines your range. Well, what is power? Power comes in lots of forms. In negotiations, it comes in the form of alternatives. So my brother had no alternatives. He lacked power. The company had lots of alternatives. They had power. Or sometimes it's being new to a country like an immigrant, or new to an organization, or new to an experience, like my wife and I as new parents. Sometimes it's at work, where someone's the boss and someone's the subordinate. Sometimes it's in relationships, where one person's more invested than the other person. And the key thing is that when we have lots of power, our range is very wide. We have a lot of leeway in how to behave. But when we lack power, our range narrows. We have very little leeway. And the problem is that when our range narrows, that produces something called the low power double bind. And the low power double bind happens when, if we don't speak up, we go unnoticed. But if we do speak up, we get punished. Now, many of you have heard the phrase the double bind and connected it with one thing, and that's gender. The gender double bind is women who don't speak up go unnoticed, and women who do speak up get punished. And the key thing is that women have the same need as men to speak up, but they have barriers to doing so. But what my research has shown over the last 2 decades is that what looks like a gender difference, it's not really a gender double bind, it's really a low power double bind. And what looks like a gender difference are really often just power differences in disguise. Oftentimes we see a difference between a man and a woman, or men and women, and we think biological cause. There's something fundamentally different about the sexes. But in study after study, I found that a better explanation for many sex differences is really power. And so it's the low power double bind. And the low power double bind means that we have a narrow range and we lack power. We have a narrow range and our double bind is very large. So we need to find ways to expand our range. And over the last couple decades, my colleagues and I have found 2 things really matter. The first, you seem powerful in your own eyes. The second, you seem powerful in the eyes of others. When I feel powerful, I feel confident, not fearful. I expand my own range. When other people see me as powerful, they grant me a wider range. So we need tools to expand our range of acceptable behavior. And I'm going to give you a set of tools today. Now, speaking up is risky, but these tools will lower your risk of speaking up. So the first tool I'm going to give you got discovered in negotiations, and an important finding. On average, women make less ambitious offers and get worse outcomes than men at the bargaining table. But Hannah Raleigh Bowles and Emily Monotula have discovered there's one situation where women get the same outcomes as men and are just as ambitious. That's when they advocate for others. And when they advocate for others, they discover their own range and expand it in their own mind. They become more assertive. Now, this is sometimes called the mama bear effect. Like a mama bear defending her cubs, when we advocate for others, we can discover our own voice. But sometimes we have to advocate for ourselves. How do we do that? And one of the most important tools we have to advocate for ourselves is something called perspective taking. And perspective taking is really simple. It's simply looking at the world through the eyes of another person. And it's one of the most important tools we have to expand our range. When I take your perspective and I think about what you really want, you're more likely to give me what I really want. But here's the problem. Perspective taking is hard to do. So
Flick to link, a link to flick.
To Spotlight. I'm Bruce Gulland.
And I'm Colin Lowther.
My photo